Today is Shabbat Shekhoim. It is also the start of the month of Adar. When I think of Adar, I think of Purim. And when I think of Purim, I think of Yad Chessed and its founder, Bob Housman. Bob has always been giving back. He gave back when he served his country with his work in Uruguay for the Peace Corps. Equally important has been his work for the Jewish community. Bob has been giving back to the Jewish congregations he has belonged to. As founder of Yad Chessed, he continued to give back by working to support the overlooked members of Boston's Jewish community. That's what Shabbat Shekhoim is all about. It's about giving back. It's about contributing to the upkeep of the Jewish community. It is my great honor to welcome Bob Housman to speak to us this morning.
Thank you, Barry, for that wonderful introduction. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today's Parsha is Parsha Teruma, and the remaining four Parshiyot of Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, deal with the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. These five Parshiyot go into extraordinary detail to describe the construction. The only exception to this is the incident of the golden calf. However, what is the reason for building the Mishkan, this sacred space? There is one verse that gives the answer. In today's Parsha, in chapter 25, verse 8, it states, "Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham," and let them make me a sanctuary, and I may dwell among them. While they wandered for 40 years in the desert, the children of Israel had this sanctuary, this mikdash. Later on, in the time of King Solomon, the Jewish people built the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. However, now we have neither. What do we do now? If we look carefully at the verse, it does not say, "And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in it." It says that I may dwell among them. God is not dwelling in the sanctuary. God is dwelling among us. The Mikdash enabled us to be aware of God's presence. Without a Mikdash, or a Beit HaMikdash, how can we become aware of God's presence? One important way that we can be aware of God's presence is to serve God. One way we can serve God is by doing acts of kindness, giving a comforting word, visiting or calling someone when they are ill, are among the different acts of kindness that we can do. However, also as a community, we need to do acts of kindness. If someone is in need, the community should be there to help that person. On September 1st, 1989, I started an organization called Yad Chessed. I started it because in the Boston Jewish community, there was no place one could go if one was in need of a significant amount of financial assistance. You could go to a rabbi and he may be able to provide a few dollars from his discretionary fund. You could go to Jewish Family and Children's Services and they might be able to give a small amount of assistance. However, there was no place that provided significant financial assistance on a community-wide basis. Yad Chessed was set up to provide emergency assistance for necessities such as food, housing, heat, and other utilities. Shortly after starting Yad Chessed, I found another need that was not being met. Every city of a reasonable size had a community interest-free loan fund. Boston did not. So Yad Chessed started giving out interest-free loans. In that first year, we also added a Purim program for Matanot Levyonim that's been referred to before. This past Purim, Yad Chessed collected from over 60 congregations and many individuals and provided assistance to over 1,150 families, including from this congregation as well. We also started a program to provide food for families for Passover and Rosh Hashanah. And twice a year, we started providing clothing certificates for families with children. Last but not least, we started a program to provide monthly food certificates for families in need. That has become one of our biggest programs. It did not take me long for me to realize that Yad Chessed was very much needed. It seemed like every social worker at Jewish Family and Children's Service was referring clients to me. And Yad Chessed was making a difference. There was the woman who called up who was frantic with fear. She had a new baby at home, and she had run out of heating oil, and the house was getting cold. Yad Chessed paid for an oil delivery. There was the woman who said that she had enough money for food or enough money for heat, but not for both. She decided to eat less in order to have enough heat. No one should have to make a choice like that. Yad Chessed provided monthly food certificates. Yad Chessed receives many letters and notes from the people we have helped. I would like to share 2 of them with you. Dear Yad Chessed, as you know, I am a single dad and full-time student. My daughter and I would like to take this time to thank you for all the generous help you have given us over the years. At times, it has not been easy for us, even after we left the shelter we were in. But through all the rough times, Yad Chessed has been there for us, and we are grateful. I do not know how many people have come to Yad Chessed for help over the years, but what I do know is if it were not for organizations like yours, people like my daughter and I would not be able to survive. Thanks to the ongoing efforts of Yad Chessed, I have been able to continue my education and provide a stable home environment for my daughter, as well as plan for our future after I graduate. I cannot express in words how much this means to us. Finally, there was the woman whose husband had recently died. She was going to receive government assistance, but in the meantime, she had fallen behind on her mortgage and facing possible foreclosure. What did Yad Chessed do? I will let her tell you in this note that she wrote to us. Dear Yad Chessed, I'm writing to you today to thank you for all that you and your foundation have done for my children and me. As you know, my husband passed away shockingly a few months ago. I am and have been disabled for 4 years. He was the provider for myself and our 2 children, ages 11 and 17. Along with all the emotional heartache this loss has caused, financially things were at a standstill, a very scary place to be. I was late with most of my bills and was 3 months behind in my mortgage payments and facing a possible foreclosure. I find it hard to explain the gratitude I feel. Because of your kindness and generosity, along with the help from another foundation, I have caught up with my overdue mortgage and actually see a small glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. You didn't know my husband, myself, or my children, yet you took the time to listen. You made it quite clear that you would be happy to do anything you could to help us. In addition to all of this, your offer for supermarket and butchery coupons is so generous that I am for a loss for words. I like to think that my father and my husband are looking down at my daughters and me and have guided us to your door. I only hope one day I will get the chance to meet you and be able to thank you in person for helping us so. I feel as though a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders and I have a little room to breathe. I do not know what I would have done without you. Surely my home would have been facing foreclosure. I wish I could say my children and I are not sad anymore, but I know that it will be a lot of time, if ever, to heal our broken hearts. However, I want you to know how incredibly lucky I feel to have found you in my time of desperate need. Thank you so much for all that you have done for us. I will never forget you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Let's bring Yad Chessed up to the present. I was only one person and the work was becoming overwhelming. However, even more important, what would happen when I could no longer do Yad Chessed? I felt that Yad Chessed had a very important role in the community and should not end. So my first step was to form a board of directors. Then Yad Chessed received a rather large bequest, and we used those funds to hire our first employee, a part-time social worker. Then we made the big move and hired an executive director to replace me. Yad Chessed is now a real organization that includes 4 social workers on staff. Yad Chessed was started because there was a need in the community that was not being addressed. No one was providing financial assistance to people in need in the Jewish community to any reasonable degree. When I first started Yad Chessed, on several occasions, people came to me who said that they had gone to Catholic charities for assistance because they could find no organization in the Jewish community to help them. I found that to be an embarrassment. Recently, another need has arisen that was not being met in the Jewish community. There used to be an organization called Hebrew Free Burial. They helped pay burial costs for people who could not afford them. This was a vital service that they were performing. Kavod hamet, honoring the dead, is an important mitzvah in Judaism. However, Hebrew free burial no longer exists. It appears that they ran out of funds. If you could not afford burial costs, there was no place that you could turn. On several occasions, people had their relatives cremated because they could not afford the burial costs. Since there was no one else who stepped up to meet this need, Yad Chessed has started helping with paying for burial costs. As it says on Yad Chessed's website, everyone in our community deserves a safety net. There is one member of Temple Emmanuel who played an important role in the founding of Yad Chessed. When I was in the process of starting Yad Chessed in 1989, I needed to make Yad Chessed a legal nonprofit organization so that donations to Yad Chessed would be tax deductible. However, I'm not a lawyer. I had no idea how to do that. So I went to meet with Michael Bonin to see if he could help. Now, Michael had never met me before. He had no idea how successful this new organization would be. In fact, I had no idea how successful it would be. However, despite that, he had an attorney in his firm, Nutter, McLennan, and Fish, draw up the documents to make Yad Chessed an official nonprofit organization. I am very thankful to Michael for doing that. In addition, I see that in the congregation today is Susan Vishner. Her husband, Ira Vishner, spent well over 10 years, might have been over 15 years. He was like this super volunteer. He handled all the donations, all the loan repayments during that time, and especially during Purim, which is coming up, because at Purim time we had from many congregations a huge number of donations. And despite the fact that at that time he was head of the Israel Folk Dance Festival, and he was preparing for that, and he was always good-natured when I bring hundreds of donations to his house for him to process. So I am very grateful for his efforts on behalf of Yad Chessed. However, I have a concern. I worry that there might be people who need help and whom Yad Chessed could help, but because they don't know that Yad Chessed exists, they will not get that help. That is one reason why I'm speaking to you today. On the two tables outside the sanctuary, there is some written material about Yad Chessed. There is a flyer that tells you about the activities of Yad Chessed. In addition, there are 2 sets of cards. Those cards are important. I gave a talk about Yad Chessed, and several days at a synagogue, and several days after my talk, I received a phone call from a person who was present for my talk, and she asked for assistance from Yad Chessed. I felt good that because of my talk, someone was going to receive the help that she needs. However, it turned out that it was not because of my talk that she was calling Yad Chessed. She called because another Jewish social service agency had referred her to Yad Chessed. On the table outside of the sanctuary, there is a set of cards that gives contact information for Yad Chessed, so that if you need assistance, you can get the help that you need. There is also another set of cards on those 2 tables. President John F. Kennedy, when he was elected president, gave an inaugural address that included the famous words, "And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." However, in that speech, there were other words that are equally important. Here is how President Kennedy ended his inaugural address. "With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history, the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." Let me repeat that. Here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Without a sanctuary, how do we cause God to dwell among us? By making God's work truly our own. Any act of kindness makes God's work our own. On the tables outside the sanctuary, that second set of cards gives information so that you can make a donation to Yad Chessed, so that people in our community who are hungry have food to eat, those who may lose their apartment have a place to live, and those who can't pay their heating bill have heat in their apartment. In his book, To Heal a Fractured World, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs states, "If there is one thing I have learned from the people I have met, rich and poor, powerful and powerless, is that the meaningfulness of a life lies not in what you take, but in what you give. I would like to close with a poem entitled The Gift of Choice by Gertrude Hildreth Housman. I came into the world without being asked, and when the time for dying comes, I shall not be consulted. But between the boundaries of birth and death lies a dominion of choice, to be a doer or a dreamer, to be a lifter or a leaner, to speak out or remain silent, to extend a hand in friendship or to look the other way, to feel the sufferings of others or to be callous and insensitive. These are the choices. It is in the choosing that my measure as a person is determined. Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov.
Bob, thank you for your beautiful words and the incredibly important and inspiring story of God's work that you made our own in Greater Boston and in Greater Jewish Boston. We have so much to do to continue that good work.